Permit me to make polite introduction of myself for those of you who are not yet known to me. My name is Henry, Patrick Henry Jr. Esquire, your most humble and obedient servant to command, and I just received the very high and unmerited honor to have been appointed to serve a second term as your first governor of the Commonwealth since our separation. I have endeavored and would continue to endeavor to serve you diligently and well. First, I believe it might be proper for me to recount the circumstances that brought that particular speech about. To refresh you, it was in December of 1773, in a noble effort to protest an unconstitutional tax upon that most detestable commodity of East India tea, that a number of men in Boston determined to destroy 45 tons of loose East India tea into the harbor at Boston. To said, in fact, there is still no fish to be sighted within 7 miles of the metropolis. What followed that was a series of what were most justifiably called the intolerable acts, designed not only to punish those responsible individuals for that admittedly criminal action, but indeed the entire population of Massachusetts Bay. Women, children, made no difference. Everyone was going to suffer under the intolerable acts. They included revoking the Charter of Massachusetts, imposing military government, martial law, the quartering of British troops within the homes of the citizenry. All civil rights which we had long cherished as freeborn Britons were deprived of every soul in the entire province. Trial by jury, the right to freely assemble, the right to hold free and open elections, the right to keep and bear arms, to a free press, all of those, all others besides, deprived of every citizen. All the while, of course, the threats being constantly made in the halls of the British government that the rest of us throughout America could expect much the same rough treatment if we continued to do what we as Britons had done for 5 centuries, since the time of the Magna Carta, standing with manly firmness and insisting upon our God-given rights and liberties to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, worst of all of these coercive acts was the Boston Port Bill, which determined that a fleet of British warships would sail into Boston's harbor and seal it off altogether to all traffic and commerce in and out, resulting in the starvation of thousands of innocents within that province. Now here in this city, despite long detesting New England men on general principles, nonetheless realized that this attack upon Boston was an attack upon us all. And so our last action as a colonial legislature was to resolve for a day of fasting and prayer to coincide with the closure of Boston's port, that we might appeal to Almighty God to avert civil war with our mother country. For that resolution, our royal governor, Lord Dunmore, dissolved the House of Burgesses, and we never met again as a colonial assembly. We did, however, meet extra-legally in a series of conventions. There were a total of 5 of them, with the 5th one being in May of 1776, wherein Virginia became the first former British colony to officially and publicly declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Huzzah. The first convention occurred in the summer of 1774. You see, Virginia realized that we all throughout America had to speak with one collective voice. And the best way to do this was to meet in a general congress at some central and convenient location. Philadelphia City eventually chosen to that purpose. Our first convention had only one small task, really, to elect a delegation of 7 men to represent Virginia at that first Congress. I, in fact, was one of the 7, and to formulate the instructions for that delegation. While in Philadelphia, we decided that we were going to have to meet at a second Congress a few months later to see how well we're going our efforts towards a peaceful reconciliation with our mother country. That, of course, required a second convention to elect a delegation and to formulate their instructions. Now, the first convention met here in Williamsburg City in the Capitol building. We could meet here with impunity because Lord Dunmore had taken that opportunity to go to Kentucky to fight savages. The cat was away, and oh my did we play. But he was returned by the time that March of 1775 rolled around and the time of the second Virginia Convention. We wanted to place some goodly distance betwixt ourselves and His Excellency, lest he disrupt our proceedings. And so for that reason, we chose to meet in Richmond Town, which is a 2-day ride to the north and west of here, about 60 miles. And it's only a small trading village at present, so there was only one building in the entire borough which could accommodate the 120 men attending that particular convention, that being the town church, Henrico Parish, as we now know it, which perhaps in another 60 years from now might be renamed St. John's Episcopal Church. on the third day of that committee, of that convention, I was already of the view that there was one thing awaiting us in our immediate future with regard to our mother country, and that was war. This based upon the conduct of the British government for the previous 10 or 12 years. I furthermore could not help but notice that we were woefully unprepared to defend ourselves in the event of a British invasion. And so, in order to put Virginia into a state of readiness, I introduced a resolution calling for Virginia to place herself into a defensive military posture by forming up independent companies of foot, gentlemen volunteers, aged 16 to 60, in all of the 61 counties of Virginia, that they be armed, trained to arms, and ready to march at a moment's notice. Of course, as hostilities had not yet erupted at that point, the greatest number of the men in the convention were opposed to this general idea, especially these Tidewater elites, the Eastern aristocrats here from Williamsburg and the environs hard by, and gentlemen of great weight and influence too. Both the Randolph brothers, for example, Mr. Robert Carter Nicholas, George Wythe, your neighbor here on the Palace Green, a few other very influential gentlemen. In effect, their argument was this: please, Mr. Henry, we seek peace, sir, not war. Your scheme is not the way to go about a peaceful solution, like quite the contrary. Your resolution is going to be viewed as a hostile or aggressive action. And rather than keeping any invasion of Redcoats and Marines from invading Virginia, you're going to be encouraging them here. You'll be asking them to perpetrate the same atrocities here as they have in Massachusetts Bay, to blockade the Hampton Roads and the Chesapeake Bay, to quarter British troops in our homes, to revoke our charter. Peace, Mr. Henry, peace. And furthermore, sir, have you lost your senses? We are far too weak to give any consideration to contesting the might of the great British Lion. As I looked around the town church from the third pew, I became increasingly alarmed that with their eloquence and their very great influence, that they had successfully persuaded a majority of men to vote against my resolution, thus continuing us in this defenseless state. I clearly had to do something. I desired to be recognized, took to the floor, and delivered a great many more words than future generations might realize. For you've probably already discovered that I am not one for brevity. But which concluded with one particular statement for which I expect I might be best remembered. And a pity, too. No, not that I would ever wish to lessen or denigrate the importance or the significance of that day. It was, after all, the first call to arms heard in America. As Colonel Mason says, the first public cry for independence. At the same time, though, friends, I flatter myself that I have made a number of contributions to the cause of liberty and the birth of this nation, and to be remembered by most Americans well into the future for but part of a sentence only. Speak of injustice. As I say, I do not write my speeches in advance and simply read them from the floor, once recognized, or as others will do. My friend Mr. Jefferson, for example, will give his prepared statements to someone of better voice to have the other gentleman read his remarks. I have at times, of course, referred to notes, but at that particular occasion I was speaking extempore from my mother wit in defense of my resolution. And I recall saying something like this: no man, Mr. President, thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very honorable gentlemen who have just addressed this House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful of those worthy gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, that I should speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before this House is one of awful moment to the country. For my part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty to the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. we are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. But is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be among the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my own part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I should wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify these hopes of peace and reconciliation with which the gentlemen are pleased to solace themselves and the members of this House. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array if its purpose be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive to it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this vast accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir. She has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry has been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What new terms shall we find which have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves any longer. We have done everything that could be done to avert this storm from coming on. We have petitioned. We have remonstrated. We have supplicated. We have prostrated ourselves before the throne and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have all been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, sir, after these things, may we continue to cling to this fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemy shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of that means which a gracious God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant. the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death! Yes, much the same reaction as the last time. Actually, no, there was silence. Stunned silence for 5 minutes, and then pandemonium. In fact, I remember distinctly hearing a man who was standing outside, for there was a great crowd gathered outside of the church listening at the open doors and windows wherever they could. A man by name of Carrington, who exclaimed, "By God, let me be buried at this spot where I heard Mr. Henry speak them words." And I'm confident he will get that wish 30 years from now. To conclude, and frankly, because of my oration, and I'm still very much humbled and honored by it, word spread like a wildfire throughout the rest of these American colonies, now states. I learned shortly thereafter that there were soldiers to the far northward as Rhode Island who were beginning to form, and like many Virginia fighting men, were sewing or stitching liberty or death upon the breasts of their hunting shirts, adopting it for their battle cry. I'm given to understand that there is something in 3 different of our states, to include Virginia, as you might expect, South Carolina, and Connecticut, something that is commonly known as the Patrick Henry Standard. It's a battle flag, in some cases a white field with a black border around it, in other cases a golden yellow in hue with a coiled rattlesnake in the middle of it, with liberty emblazoned above or death below. Some cases, as with the Culpeper Minute Company, liberty or death above, don't tread on me below. And that flag is being carried upon a number of battlefields at this very moment as I speak to you now. And finally, it occurs to me that it was really here in this city, Williamsburg, truly the birthplace of American liberty. With all respect to Philadelphia or Boston, this is the place, being the largest, the oldest, the wealthiest, and the most populous of His Majesty's colonies. We tended to be the leaders in all matters of policy, but it was here, too, that we first crossed over that threshold into establishing a bold, most audacious experiment, establishing a new nation, a republic, conceived in liberty and with the honest intention of justice under law for all men, not only the wealthy few. My friends, I am confident that this experiment of ours will serve not only as a beacon of hope for oppressed societies all around this globe, but I expect, too, that it's going to serve as the envy of some others. I warrant you, there will always be those wicked forces, both from without of our shores as well as from within, why within our own government perhaps at times, men who are going to seek to change our uniquely American way of life, which we hold so dear, so precious, to impose their will upon us and to deprive us of that precious jewel of liberty. When such times of crisis do emerge into the future, I pray that once again those words might stand for the battle cry: liberty or death. For Americans, there is no other option.